Welcome to this session where I will be demonstrating the new features and enhancements of the time series display within Delft Views for 2020. So in general, the time series display is the location in Views where you look at your scalar time series. This can be just your regular deterministic time series, maybe ensemble, plots, and the time series display is dynamically linked to your Delft Views Explorer, to the filter where you can make selections, and Delft Views allows for a very flexible setup of your displays. You can have predefined displays, general display functions that are configured in the back end, allowing for consistency in viewing of your data. You can add or remove buttons, and something which is pretty nice and which I will be demonstrating today because it has some enhanced functionality is on-the-fly statistical functions and in general statistical functions that you can use on the data in your Views Explorer. So what I will be demonstrating today are statistical functions, on-the-fly expressions, and some features related to hiding of selected forecasts directly from the display, and a nice little workflow navigator pop-up feature. Let's dive in. Here we are in our test application that I will use to show the enhanced time series display features of 2020. We're in a Canadian system of the Yukon, and if I open the data viewer on the left side, you see the option to show the data sources, the locations, and the parameters, and in case of forecast time series, also the simulations that you want to view. Let's say that I want to see some observed data. I made a selection and I will go to the data display, and my data will be visualized in a plot and in a table view. I can zoom out and zoom in and look at the data in multiple ways. I have enhanced functions using this little drop down at the table icon, and the same goes for the little drop down at the plot icon. Today I want to say something about statistical functions and statistics in general. So there's multiple ways that you can on the fly calculate or visualize some statistics about the data that's visible. The first is showing column statistics. If I activate the column statistics in the table on top of my table data, I get some quick statistics. That's very useful. On top of that, if I change the view of my data from one long continuous series to maybe daily increments, then my data is split into separate days and I get daily statistics. That can be quite useful if you want to assess some quick information. Let's go back to a normal view and turn off the column statistics. An additional option to show some statistics is the statistical button that you have here. If you activate that, you'll get a new panel which also shows some quick statistics and some other information about the time series that you have visible. On the right, we have the statistical functions drop-down, and these are statistical functions that use the scalar time series to produce a statistical time series using a very specific statistical function. There's a list of configured statistical functions that is displayed here. There are many available, and if you select one of these statistical functions, the calculated time series are displayed in the same graph as the time series that they're based on. Many of these functions were already available, but some are new in 2020. One thing that I want to show that's new is the quick statistical function button. So instead of selecting a function from a drop-down menu, it's now also possible to configure a specific button that has that statistical function associated with it. In this particular example, I have two buttons. One is a cumulative series and the other is a scatter plot. So if I activate the scatter plot, I get a scatter between the two time series that I had visible. Let me quickly turn this off because it doesn't quite look like a very useful scatter. If I zoom out a little bit more, I can see that maybe the view that I had earlier was due to the resolution of my data. Let's try that again. Yes, I see now that there is some relation, but due to the nature of my input data and the quite jumpy nature of my water levels, the relation is not perfect. Let's see if we can find another location that has maybe a better association. Let's try a scatter over here. This looks much smoother. Morley River also shows a nice scatter, and this is calculated on the fly based on the available time series. Cumulative time series are useful, for example, for precipitation data. So let's take a quick look at some precipitation data. Let me go for some forecast data by basins, and let me select this basin and this basin. Here we go. And now the cumulative series will show me the precipitation for these two basins calculated on the fly. That's quite useful. There's also a new statistical function that I want to draw your attention to, and this is under the difference plot function. Let us quickly go to some forecast flow results. Let me go here and let me select this location and the simulated flow. And what you currently see is me having selected two different forecast results. I have done this by selecting in forecast management two different forecast runs and opening them. This makes them both available in the data viewer, and this means in the data display that both of them are visible here. So when I open the difference plot, I now have a new option, which is compare runs. And this allows me to show the difference between these two forecast runs based on the scalar time series. I can see the absolute difference, but I can also see the relative difference. And what is nice is that this difference functionality is also available in the spatial display. When I go to the spatial data and I go to the outflow and the gridded results, I automatically am directed to an absolute difference or a relative difference map between these two forecast runs. And these are animated, and so I can go through time and see the difference in a spatial manner. Let me now switch to the data display to show the new functionality regarding the on-the-fly expressions. I go to the data viewer. First, I make sure to deselect these two simulations. And now I have selected forecast data for several stations and specifically temperature data. When I open data display, I see the time series in my viewer. When I want to see the on-the-fly expressions, I select this button on top and open this particular panel. Now I can create a new time series and do some calculations and arithmetic based on the existing time series. Let's create some mean temperature based on the available time series. And my formula is actually referencing the column headers. So let me do A plus divided by 5. And now I've created the new time series F over here, which is the average of these 5 time series. Let me now create a new time series which also uses the new parameter F that we just created. Let's make it a relative difference with the A time series. Because it's a relative difference, we're going to make it dimensionless, and we can calculate it as A over F. We create this time series, and it's added to our time series. This gives us a lot of flexibility to add new time series and do some arithmetic on the fly. A neat new little function to control the time series visible in your display is selecting the Show On/Off checkboxes in Legend functionality. This allows you to directly turn off certain time series from the legend instead of going to the visibility drop-down menu and deselecting certain time series. Another new 2020 functionality is the ability to hide selected forecasts directly from the menu when multiple forecasts are open. For this, let me switch to a pre-configured display over here, and let's remove all the additional time series that I created. So here I'm back at my pre-configured display, and I have the possibility to select multiple forecasts here and show them in the plot. Now I have 3 time series visible, but also the associated recharge and runoff time series. Maybe this is a little bit too much, and based on what I see, I decide to turn off this time series. I can do so, but now I still have to turn off the other time series as well that are associated with that forecast. To help me do that, what I can do is select the time series that I want to turn off, and then select Hide Selected Forecasts, and this deactivates all the associated time series from the display. And the final small feature is associated with the workflow navigator. Let me quickly show just the current forecast and open my pre-configured display. When I go to the workflow navigator, in the workflow navigator, let's say I want to add 2 specific time series to my pre-existing plot. For example, a QR sim and a recharge for a different location. I can go to Add Time Series to Plots from the workflow navigator. I select the location that I want to see, in this case maybe Yukon River at Carmax, and I click OK. Now the time series are added to my pre-configured display, and the display stays intact. And my time series are now available over here and also over here. And this can be quite useful to add additional time series to pre-configured displays and come to a better analysis. And that ends our demonstration. We've just witnessed a demonstration of several time series display enhancements. Most of these functions are available directly without configuration. For some, configuration is required. I hope you are inspired to check some of these functions out. So there are some features that I did not present during the demonstration. I'll quickly go over a few. There's on-the-fly statistics related to long-term periodic functions. This is an additional statistic type that has been added, and it adds periodic time series based on the long-term scroller. This is very handy, for example, to compare values of time series compared to what is normal on that particular date. We also have percentile resampling that's similar to the aforementioned statistics, but you can also compare values to what is normal for that current month or year or any chosen interval. There's a new logarithmic axis in the time series display, which is configurable and for which you have control in the time series display itself. And there are some scatter plot improvements. These require some configuration, and information can be found on the wiki. If you want to find further information or documentation, you can go to the Delft Views wiki, or you can Google Delft Views wiki with useful additional search words. Of course, you can also visit the Delft Views forum.